Hi, welcome to the Juvenile Justice recording. So, how and what do we know about juveniles? Well, let's find out. Today, we're going to talk about the measurement of juvenile crime. What do we know about the extent of juvenile crime? The UCR and the Uniform Crime Reports, juvenile court statistics, victimization surveys. What are the self-report and cohort measures of juvenile crime? Self-report studies, cohort studies. What are the dimensions of law-violating behaviors? The age of onset. Escalation of offenses, specialization of offenses, desistance from crime, transition to adult behavior. From where do juvenile victims come? The family and victimization of children, the school and victimization. All right, so let's get started. What are the types of official measurements of juvenile crime? So how do we know what's going on with juveniles and what types of crime juveniles are committing? Well, our official measurements come from a couple different places. One is the UCR, or the Uniform Crime Reports. It's juvenile court statistics and national victimization surveys are the three main sources where we get the official measurements. The Uniform Crime Reports and juvenile court statistics are based on the tabulation of data collected from police and juvenile courts. So basically, if things don't get reported to the police or through juvenile courts, we don't know about them. And then that's where the national victimization surveys come in. So you're going to find out where all that comes from. So although those three things don't account for everything, they do a pretty good job at giving us a good idea about juvenile crime. So what is the UCR and its findings? What is it? And it's soon to be called NIBRS or whatever you want to say. And we're going to talk about that too. So the Uniform Crime Reports, or UCR, is about to change, but let's talk about what it is and what it's reporting and what we're getting from it. So first of all, started in 1930. It was authorized by Congress and designated to the FBI to implement the program based on efforts started by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, or IACP. It divides crime into two parts. It's what we call Part 1 crimes and Part 2 crimes. So Part 1 crimes are considered the more serious offenses, and they are murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. And the property offenses include burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson. And then Part 2 crimes are considered your less serious offenses and are recorded by arrest only. So it's only recorded if there's an arrest. And those are simple assault, forgery, embezzlement, vandalism, sex offenses, statutory rape, gambling, and prostitution. So basically, the UCR is only recording those Part 1 and Part 2 crimes. That's it. All right, so, and in 2021, the UCR is no longer going to be called the UCR. It's going to be called the NIBRS program, okay, just so you know. It's the National Incident-Based Reporting System. And the UCR has limitations, which we know that. So that's why there's three different ways that we measure juvenile crime. Number one, it's based on crimes reported to the police. So if a crime isn't reported to the police, we don't know about it. Can you think of something that may not be reported to the police when a crime occurs? Police typically arrest offenders that commit crimes, not the minor ones. Crimes rates may appear inflated because youthful offenders are easier to catch. Because youth generally commit crimes in groups, the reporting of all the group's crimes may overestimate youth crime. Due to the hierarchy rule, only the most serious crime is counted. Okay, and then we find out about juvenile crime through court statistics. So what do they cover? Well, it was developed in 1929 to learn about the nature and extent of problems coming before the court. And it was to show the nature and extent of services provided by the court so that trends could be identified and to show the extent that the services have been effective. So we've Status offenses. What are status offenses? We talked about those already. It's things that only a certain part of the population can commit. Behaviors for which juveniles but not adults could be arrested for, such as truancy, running away, curfew, minor in possession of alcohol. And then we have delinquency offenses as well, criminal conduct in violation of a law. So what are the main findings of juvenile court stats? Well, delinquency increases with age. So as the juveniles get older, the violations increase. Juvenile courts processed 4 times as many cases in 2002 than they did in 1960. Ungovernability and truancy declines at age 15, but liquor law violations continue to increase. Males are referred to juvenile court more frequently than females are. Females are referred to juvenile court for truancy and ungovernability at the same rate as males, though female rates are increasing relative to males. And white males are referred to juvenile court in numbers relative to their population, to their proportion of the population, but African American were referred at rates disproportionately. All right, so this is an amazing video. I highly recommend watching it. I normally do groups. What I start is start the video at 9 minutes, 30 seconds, and I watch it through 20 minutes, and we focus on Jesus and Marquise, 2 of the kids in the video. I recommend watching all of it if you can, but we focus on those 2 children because one was convicted of murder. The other one shot another victim, and then his uncle shot him, and he was killed. When Marquise shot the victim, it paralyzed the victim, and then when his uncle shot him, it killed him. But we talk about these 2 cases, and I recommend talking about them and watching these videos. It really does open your eyes about kids behind bars and rehabilitation and what's offered. All right, so continuing on, we then have what are called the third way that we capture juvenile crime is through what's called victimization surveys. So again, we have UCR, crimes that police report on, and then we have the courts, juvenile courts that are reporting, and then we have victimization surveys. So victimization surveys, which are called National Crime Victimization Surveys, or NCVS, started in 1972 because we knew that UCR was only collecting Part 1 and Part 2 crimes, and we were missing a huge amount of crime out there. So what we did was the U.S. Census Bureau surveyed approximately 42,000 households consisting of nearly 72,000 people aged 12 and up, and they started conducting interviews every 6 months. And the interviewers started being trained to collect household victimization data from anyone that was 12 years old or older. And the data that they were collecting was superior, and it covers more crimes and gets more background information. And some of their findings found that youth between the ages of 16 and 19 had the highest victimization rates than any other group in the survey for violent crimes. They found that adolescents were more likely to commit violent crimes against their peers than adults were. And the probability of victimization varies with the type of crime and place of residence. That city centers experience higher levels of violent crime. And of course, there were limitations of the victimization surveys. The limitations were information on status offenses are not included. Victims may forget victimizations they've experienced, and victims may mistakenly state they were a victim of a crime during a different year. And what are the differences between a self-report study and a cohort study? Remember at the beginning I said we were going to talk about those. So self-report studies are when we ask juveniles to tell about the offenses that they have committed in a previous time period. Where a cohort study is where they identify every juvenile born in a certain time frame in a particular city and then follow them for many years. So this is something you're going to want to remember for the future quiz. Okay, so why are self-report studies important? What are their findings? Well, they tell us a significant amount of crime goes undetected in the United States. They tell us that middle-class juveniles are involved in a considerable amount of crime, and that hidden delinquency hides a large number of hidden crimes not discovered by police, and the crime gap between white and African Americans is smaller than the official statistics indicate, and that girls commit more delinquent acts than are reported in official stats. And what are cohort studies and why are they important? And again, cohort studies often examine larger groups of people, all of whom were born in a specific time period, and they do not rely on institutionalized populations for data. And they eliminate many confounding social variables that might affect study findings. They show progression of crimes, and according to cohort studies conducted of 1,517 youth in Pittsburg, offending by boys involved in serious offenses occurred by age 15. In the same study, it was found that boys developed disruptive and delinquent behavior in a fairly ordered manner from less serious to more serious crimes. And a cohort study in Rochester, New York found a strong link between delinquency and gang membership. Also, associating with delinquent peers was strongly correlated with delinquent activity. There were limitations of cohort studies. The findings cannot be generalized beyond the persons in the cohort, and the cohort studies are extremely expensive and time-consuming. All right, so what are the dimensions of the law-violating behaviors? First is the age of onset, the escalation of the numbers of offenses, the specialization of offenses, and the desistance from the crime, and transition to adult crime. So what is the age of onset? Well, the age of onset is the age at which juveniles start their law-violating behaviors. One study found that as the age of onset increased, the average number of offenses decreased. Another study found that offending at an early age was one factor that predicted who became a chronic offender. Still another study reported that those convicted of offending at the earliest age, 10 to 12 years old, offended at a higher rate and for a longer period of time. So what does the escalation of the offenses mean? The escalation of offenses is an increase in the number of crimes committed by an individual. Official statistics reveal that the incidence of arrest accelerates at age 13 and levels off at age 17. This pattern is less evident in self-reports. What is meant by specialization of offenses? The specialization of offenses is the tendency to repeat one type of crime. Findings do not consistently show specialization among delinquent offenders. However, one study found that status offenders were typically referred to the juvenile court 50 to 70% of the time for the same offense. Female status offenders were most frequently referred for running away. What is meant by desistance from crime? Desistance from crime is the termination of delinquency. Hard to measure exactly when a person stops offending. Theories regarding desistance include maturing and aging, development, cognitive shifts, rational choice, social learning, we learn to be bad, we learn to be good, life course, occurs when an individual chooses to stop. Describe the transition to adult crime. To what is the transition related? Transition to adult crime is when juveniles who commit juvenile crime continue to commit crime as adults. The earlier juveniles start, the more likely they are to continue crime as adults. What is childhood victimization and what are its types? Numbers of children victimized. Reports have indicated that the maltreatment of children has increased by 155% between 1980 and 1993. Childhood victimization leveled off between 1994 and 99, but started to increase in the new millennium. There were almost 3 million reports of abuse in 2000. Many states require certain professions, teachers, doctors, police, to report child abuse. Categories of maltreatment. Maltreatment falls into several categories: neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional mistreatment, and others. Types of violence. Homicide is the most common. 79% of child murder victims were killed by their parents. Females were twice as likely to be killed by family members than males. Children under 8 were more likely to die from neglect. Children over 8 were more likely to die from physical or sexual abuse. And young children were more likely to die at the hands of family members, while older children were more likely to be murdered by non-family members. What are the parameters of in-school victimization? Extent of victimization. According to UCR data, crime in school dropped from the mid-90s through 2002. 5% of all students report victimization. Violent victimization is greater out of school than in school. Less than 1% of students experience violent victimizations. Types of victimization. Theft is committed at a rate of 45 out of 1,000 students. Violent crime is committed at a rate of 28 out of 1,000 students. Serious violent crime is committed at a rate of 3 out of 1,000 students. Types of schools in which found: urban schools experience greater crime than rural. All right, this ends this presentation. Thank you.